Woo! And I think we all need to sit back and think about what a tremendous asset Adrian is for this entire community. And any con that wouldn't have him would be absolutely insane.
Thank you.
Hey guys, if there's open seats, it's open. I don't care. There's no saving seats. Please come sit down, everybody.
Nice. This is nice. Say nice.
Calm down.
You.
So easy.
Thank you. Please come sit down.
I volunteer Nickerson's lap for Jay Beal.
Dun, 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 dun,
Andy getting married.
Isn't that nice?
Your marketing game is 100.
It's much better. It's much better than a warm can of Smirnoff Ice. I hate Trent. I really do. I really hate you. This is horrible. Hey.
What?
How warm is it? How warm is it? Hey, John, how warm is it? John, how warm is it?
Touch it. Feel it. Caress it.
That's warm.
That's ass crack.
That's good.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's good. All right, so we're going to kick this off. So this is our panel, and really, when we're coming out with the schedules, what we look at for DerbyCon is really, who can we get in here that can, reach a mass amount of audiences and talk to folks. And what I want to do is I wanted to bring a lot of folks that I respect a whole lot in this industry, folks that I've learned off of, that I looked up to, and I still do, except, no.
You are literally looking up to us right now.
Yeah, I am looking up. This is really weird, you're looking down to me. No, but these are the folks that like HD. I know when I was getting into this industry, I remember popping Metasploit to I think it was Framework 2 that was written in Perl at the time, and lo and behold, I remember popping a SCADA infrastructure, with I don't even think it was Meterper in Framework 2? Yeah, it was still in Framework 2. Yeah. Yeah, so it was something that I remember popping a box and getting access to that. And I was like the coolest thing ever, and I was in the Marines doing all this stuff, and HD was one of my heroes growing up, and Ed growing up in the speaking that he's done, and Nickerson who had a TV show that he doesn't like to talk about, but Tiger Team, you guys should watch that show and then email Chris about how much you like that show, okay? And John and everybody else that has really dedicated their careers to this industry, more so not just from a career perspective, but their lives and what they try to do for the community. So I wanted to get them all together and hopefully do some open dialogue. I'm just going to be here to facilitate communications. What I'd like to do is if we could have audience participation too. If you'd like to ask any questions you want to, what kind of underwear they're wearing, whatever's fine. It doesn't matter. It's a wide open thing here. But it's a wide open dialogue here that we wanted to do and kind of talk about where we're at as far as the industry. So I'll kick it off to you guys. Guys, this is serious faces now. Serious faces. Oh, you're playing. Oh, get away from my laptop. Get away from my laptop. No. I was supposed to. No, leave my laptop alone. Oh, you guys, come on, give me this. Give me this. Cord goes here. Cord goes here.
So good.
It's all messed up now. You guys ruined everything.
Have the right logo on it? Yet.
There we go. All right, it's back to normal. Thank you. I don't know what happened with the power cord. All right, I'm back to normal again. All right. So obviously we see a lot of breaches and things like that in the media today. That's a big thing that is taking over the media. It's taking over what we hear from board of directors. It's taking over what we deal with on a regular basis. So I'll raise this to the panel here. Why so many breaches right now? Why so many breaches? Go ahead, Chris. Chris, you go ahead. It's all you. It's all Chris. Or John.
I blame Metasploit. So, a good friend of ours, Josh Wright, has a law, and what is it, Ed? Is it Josh Corman? Do you actually remember the quote about? Yeah, I'll pass it over to Ed.
So I'm sure you guys are familiar with H.D. Moore's Law. H.D., you're familiar with it, right? The idea is if your security defenses are not getting better at least the rate that Metasploit's capabilities are increasing, you will get owned. And I think this is an irrefutable law, really. So anyway, so blaming Metasploit. The thing of it is, when they do the breaches, they're not using Metasploit for a lot of them, at least the ones I'm investigating. No offense, H.D. But Metasploit is driving a lot of the innovation there, and the bad guys use those techniques, if not the specific tool.
Just one quick
pushback on that. If you look at the client-side exploits that have been added to Metasploit over the last 4 or 5 years, almost every single one is based on a public sample being exploited in the wild before we got to it. So it's not that Metasploit is driving the industry, it's that the black hats are driving the industry. We're just trying to keep up at this point.
So would you say it's the same dilemma of releasing the information to the public so they can protect themselves versus having the black hats have everything they want access to in order to do it?
I'm a big believer in disclosure, so it's one of those arguments we've been fighting for years, and I don't understand why anybody's on the other side. We have to be releasing it.
I have to play the other side of that. I don't think more people are getting owned. I think we have more compliance and more things that give us visibility to know that we got owned. But I think the same amount of people are getting owned that used to be.
Yeah.
Would you say though that the industry has grown though? I mean, both if you look at audiences at conferences, 10 years ago we didn't have conferences like this, as big as they were. I mean, would you say that the industry's gotten bigger on both sides, black hat and white hat, which means that more attacks would occur or go up?
I kind of disagree with that point. How many of you guys are in roles that you would consider to be mixed? You're doing defense and offense for your organization. Could you guys all please raise your hands? So you look at the vast majority of people that attend these cons, they're people that are trying to do both roles. They're trying to be defenders. They're trying to understand the offense to do better, and it's very, very hard to serve both masters and get very good at both things. So.
Great. So as far as pen testing goes, then what do we need to do to fix that? What do we need to do as an industry to get better at defending? And how does that impact our industry that we're in? A lot of us are in on the pen testing field, or red teaming, or whatever we want to call it. What's our goal to get better as an industry?
Sure. So I think an evolution, and a lot of people have been talking about this for the last couple of years, but I think we really need to get our game on. There's a talk about, hey, it's not vulnerability assessment, it's actual pen testing. But I think beyond that, it's going from pen testing to actual threat emulation. Raphael Mudge has talked about it, a lot of the stuff in the work that he's doing, HD's work. Threat emulation, so that you can say not just, you have this vulnerability, we were able to pivot through your organization after we exploited it, and wow, that's bad news for you. But to map it to what a real world bad guy can do. That makes it much more interesting to the business decision makers, and it'll let us get the resources we need to defend our organizations.
If I may,
No.
So Ed is absolutely correct. We have to be doing adversarial mapping. But one of the things that I've been working on for a little while now, that once it's finished to a point where it's usable, we're going to release it open source, is something we're calling adversarial insight. And it's the ability not just to say, I'm this cool hacker, and I can do this, and I can do these neat attacks, but to actually quantify how well the defense is detecting you, right? We talk a lot about, I get in every time, I get in every time, I get in every time. That's really not an important metric. We all suck, right? The metric we really need to look at, and I hate the word metric, so ignore that I used it, but how well did they detect us? How well would they have responded if they had seen the attacks that we did? Because if we're not helping them improve that, all we're doing is showing how elite we are and taking their money.
That's a great point. The other thing, talking about what we can do as pen testers, because it's predominantly an offensive-based conference, right? We have the track to defend it, and that's cool. But most of us are here because we like to break things. Keep doing what you're doing. The reason why I say that is because if you go outside of this industry, a lot of people say we hate people who write vulnerability or find vulnerabilities. We hate people who write exploits. We hate people that break into organizations because they're just breaking things. And I say that's crap. Keep doing what you're doing. All structure, all architecture is based on understanding failure points. And that's what we are doing in this industry, is finding those failure points. So keep finding them. Keep identifying those failure points, because things are only fragile till they break.
I just had a conversation in the hallway with some folks who work at a large enterprise, and it mirrored a conversation I had about a month ago with another organization that's doing some cutting edge stuff. And it's the idea that you have your pen testers, your red teamers, do what they do, but you set a metric of how quickly the blue team can detect them. And this one organization I was talking with a month ago said their initial metric is they wanted to be able to detect the bad guy in their presence, well, the red team, within the space of 2 weeks. And it was hard. They struggled finding him within 2 weeks. They did. They upped their game. They got better. So this is red making blue better. And then they lowered their metric to 1 week. And then they lowered it to 2 days. And now they're down to about an hour and a half. But this also challenges red so that red can get more innovative and impersonate or mimic or map to more sophisticated attackers. And I think this is beautiful. Red and blue working together. I sometimes say, I'm red. I'm offensive, through and through. In fact, if you cut me, I bleed red. That's how red I am. But that said, the purpose of red in this context.
It's really weird, by the way. But
it is weird, yeah. We do not need to do a live experiment with that. Thank you very much.
Can we test it, Chris? Can we test it? I know you got a shank on you. Chris always has a shank on him, so I mean.
But the purpose of red, never lose sight of this, the purpose of red is to make blue better. And it's a beautiful thing.
Anybody else have anything to add? Makes sense? I think we all agree. I mean, when we can learn from each other, going on the offense and having defensive folks learn from that is the best. I mean, I see time and time again where a company focuses on their defensive capabilities, and the blue team just focuses on what they know in their environment. They don't know how attackers break in. They don't know how the offense goes after things. And I've actually found that by doing the whole red team blue team piece, I learn a whole lot on the red team side because I learn how people defend better. I learned, oh, this worked. I can use this for another customer and say, hey, I've seen this work and stop us before or detect us that I haven't seen before in the past. Or this is something that made me do my technique different or change my technique different because of that. So it makes us better, which is also a win for us too. But, it also helps us to understand what, is out there, what's stopping us and what's not. And usually, I would say, would you all agree with this? 99% of the time, it's not a piece of technology. So, and that brings me to my next point on the technology side, which is my favorite topic. Why are we as an industry, I guess, focusing on the technology piece versus the people piece? You go into an IT organization that, let's just say, has 300 folks dedicated to IT, and they usually have one person dedicated to security. Now, is that feasible in a company, and can somebody, that one-person team or a two-person team or even a five-person team to that ratio compete and actually defend an organization?
The scale of the whole premise behind IT and technology in the first place is that you can scale one person to huge organizations with not as much investment. So if we're still doing things the old ways, we'd have tons and tons of admins out there. Now we have very few numbers of admins using things like DevOps and large management tools and so on. And so, of course, when you start finding vulnerabilities, you find ways to either trick them or ways to abuse the technology. You get access to much more than you ever would in the past.
So security being everyone's responsibility in an organization is one of the powerful ways that we as offense-minded folks can teach the defense-minded folks or the folks who are just keeping things running. I created a class a few years ago when I was still at my former employer called Defend the Flag. And it was designed for IT professionals who literally had no attack background whatsoever to come in for 2 days. And in the morning of the first day, they would learn host hardening stuff. And in the afternoon, they would use an exploit framework like Metasploit to launch attacks. The next day, they took turns being blue team and red team. Because prior to that, a lot of these folks had never had exposure to even Metasploit, which sounds incredible. But how many of your IT folks who are not security focused, how many of them actually have ever run Metasploit? Yeah, you're all shaking your heads no. So just the power of teaching the defenders, that in fact, understanding how easy it can be to perform offense, especially on those unhardened, soft, chewy center networks that we've seen so many times, and gets them to take responsibility for the security of the entire network, knowing that there's no real perimeter.
That you're absolutely correct. And one of the things that we've been pushing in our organization and through different presentations and things that we're doing is trying to stop this mindset that security is different, right? What I do is QA. The only difference between me when I pen test a web app and the QA person who is testing the web app is that when they find a bug, they open up a ticket and they bitch at a developer. When I find a bug, I figure out what I can do with it that's fun, right? They get upset, I giggle, right? So if we stop focusing on security as something that's completely separate, if we stop trying to treat it as this white tower that we have to be in because we're better than they are, and start really just accepting the fact that they can do what we do if we empower them to, we'll all be better. And in a case like that, one person can scale to defend, right? But if you don't have that buy-in, if you're not being inclusive, then you're never going to do it. It's going to fail.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Nickerson, everybody. Lead person in Tiger Team, the TV show on Court TV.
Don't make me do it, because I will.
All right, I'm done.
So I have something that I'm burning to add to that. When Dave sent out the email asking us to be on the panel, it was this future of security thing, right? And I took that seriously to a point of what the hell am I going to say about the future of security? Because
that was my next question, by the way, so thanks for ruining that.
No, I got you.
Yeah, we're on the same page, yeah.
Here, in my eyes, I'm with you. And I can talk about things now, but I myself didn't have a clear idea of what I thought things were going to be like in 20 or 30 or 40 years. And in order to do that, you normally have to try and find a similar avenue, right? Something that we've done before, that we know that we're going to apply the same basic principles. Whether we're going from point A to point Z in a train or a jet, we're still going from A to Z. And I think Kevin kills it, right? We're a quality assurance industry. That's what we do. We've mirrored since 1958. We've mirrored everything that QC, QA, and test iteration does. But we're really, really slow. Like, our industry is really slow. We think we're really important. They're already mad at me. We're just like the QA, QC people in the 60s and 70s. We have this huge level of skill required for us to do our job. And we have to go through all of these different iterations to make sure that the code that's produced works. So in the 50s and 60s, they had to put that under control by creating rules of style in programming. They didn't even have generic standards. They just had a style. They were like, well, fuck it. You just at least have to put paragraphs and spacing to make it look like this so that people aren't totally confused. Then from the 60s to the 70s, they started to make standardization. Right? So not only is it style, but we actually have to have these basic functions. We have to call traditional sets of libraries that other people know are standard libraries, right? Then we get from the 70s to the 80s and we start actually doing testing. Burkholz makes the books called black box testing, right? It's a software quality assurance thing that every single one of us has heard the term black box testing, and most people don't even know where the hell it comes from, and it's from the software QA world. So now we have a standard of how do we test things that we've never been involved in. Then you go the 80s to the 90s, and we start getting automated testing. Now we have testing frameworks. From the testing frameworks, we then go into, now that we have automated testing frameworks, we have to make them smarter. Now we have to move from the QA person that understands how to code. This is the part that really hurts. From coding and machine language and everything else in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, down to, well, I kind of only need to know how to do these pieces of code because some of the automation frameworks are taking over my responsibilities. So now I need to know how to manage the bug and who the bug goes to, and as well as fix the bug. But then as the framework starts to get smarter, the person who's doing the testing has to get less skilled. You don't get more skill, you don't get more money, you're gonna get less. Because now, I don't have to know all that really advanced super ninja shit. All I have to do is know that when red light comes up, it's a bug and fix the bug. Well, then you get from the 90s into the 2000s. And from the 2000s on, we start to have automation. And automation happens where all these bugs, I don't even have to fix them anymore. I just go, hey, software, route this back to the person who created the shitty code. And it's like, cool, no problem. And you click the button, and it goes back to the ninja coder person. So now the QA person has almost no skill other than project management and how to use the framework. So the reason I say all of that is because when I look at the quality assurance world and how the quality assurance world in the engineering talent went, you used to have very, very highly skilled, highly engaged, very, very technical people that had to do that stuff. Now, the people who are in the QA world, at the beginning of the QA, because there's tiers, right? You have the people who are still doing that, But there was such a limited talent pool, shocking, just like us. There was such a limited talent pool that the business had to go, well, we need to automate these things. And when we automate these things, magically, we can hire somebody for 20 grand to do the job instead of 200 grand to do the job. So my idea of the future of security is that anybody who's a pen tester right now who makes 150 grand is going to make 30 grand in the future.
Quick rebuttal on that.
I disagree somewhat.
Because of HD.
I disagree somewhat. I disagree because of the complexity of the systems that we're dealing with. We're not just dealing with code sets that we have today. We have to deal with all the code sets from yesterday. Every year progresses and the snowball of crap in your environments turns and it gets bigger and it gets bigger. Many of your environments are not getting rid of this old legacy code, and we still have these vulnerabilities that exist. And it's not just the vulnerabilities, and that's part of the problem. And that's one of the things associated with a good pen test or a good pen testing company, a red team company, is they have the ability to go beyond just looking for standard vulnerabilities that exist. But you and I were talking before, I believe that there is a crash that's going to be coming to this industry, and a lot of it has to do with what he just said. Because we're allowing this industry, as pen testers, to get completely taken over by automation tools. How many of you guys have seen tools over the past year that say, we automate a pen test? See, if you guys can be replaced by an automated tool, you will be. So this is one of the things Ed and I talk about quite a bit about pen test puppy mills who go through and automate all of these things. And those things are not pen tests. Those are not red teams.
It's a test case. Like, you're making the same dying breath request that coders did in the 80s.
In some
like
ways.
you're going, oh no, I'm important. Make sure I'm still important. Fuck you, you're not important.
You know what? That's a good point.
You're just not.
That's a good point, Chris.
Like, I could replace you with a script.
You absolutely could. And you know what? One of the things I didn't think of that you didn't talk about, but you should have, isn't it awesome because of all the automation and all the wonderfulness that they had in the 70s, 60s, and 80s, that we now have secure code?
Right. It works.
We need an expert. We need someone who actually knows what the hell she's talking about.
How many of you have actually had, okay, hands in the air, pen testers, former, current, whatever. All right, keep them in the air. Keep them in the air. Keep them up. You, yes, you. How many of you have actually had to use a 0-day in a pen test in order to successfully pwn something? Had to. No other way. Okay, because of the contract doesn't count. Doesn't count. All right, very few of you had to raise your hands. So we're all talking about like, oh, it's being automated away. But actually, oh, we have bugs in the code. But actually, we don't necessarily have like a 0-day problem. We have a patching problem. We have a patch deployment problem. How many worms, were ripping through using O-days? Not too many. That's a big burn for an O-day. Use it on as a worm. So, I mean, this has been going on for quite some time. So, what do you think actually makes organizations care about security? Well, breaches.
Money.
Okay, but let's look at that example, right? So, yeah, only money. Yes, exactly. But what happens in a case? Is anyone old enough to remember who Paris Hilton is? Okay, great. So so remember when Paris Hilton's sidekick, do you remember that? Do you remember her sidekick was
Are you talking
hacked?
about the dog?
Not talking about the dog. This has nothing to do, I'm gonna let you finish, but. So anyway, the dog had nothing to do with it. The point was, the demographic that bought the sidekick that was interested in Paris Hilton did not care that there was a breach and it was all over the papers. They couldn't keep the Sidekick 2 on the shelves after that happened. That was a classic case of security actually did not result, a big breach did not result in a loss of customers or revenue. So how do you actually get the organizations that you work for to staff you up with the resources you need, give you the tools you need, because you might actually need a few, and give you the charter to do what you need to do? You essentially don't have to have the same goals in order for them to be aligned. Just think about your organization and what is it that you are actually trying to protect? What did they hire you to do? It wasn't to prevent breaches. It was to prevent loss of revenue due to security issues. So once you kind of figure that out with your business empathy networking hat of Derby Wonder on, I have not slept. Once you figure that out, then you'll start to actually unlock some of the resources that they have for you, and you'll get more support, and you'll get more respect, and you'll get more training, and get sent to DerbyCon. Over and over, the cycle continues.
So, you know, Chris makes a very thought-provoking point about the quality of software, but we can't lose sight of users screwing up, right? Mr. Chris Hednaghy, is he still around? Social engineering, right? Plus just the abuse of legitimate credentials. And the clever use of that to demonstrate business risk. I remember when I first started in information security, I was at Belcor. My office mate was Rich Graveman, and he was one of the head cryptographers at Belcor. He was a grumpy old man. He was wonderful. I learned so much from him. And he said to me, I was a young kid, right? I had a tie on and everything. That's how we rolled in those days. I had hair. It was beautiful. All right. I got a hat. Nice hat. Exactly. So Graveman turned to me. He's like my second day in the office, and he said, "Kid, don't rely on just information security." This was in 1996. He said, "I'm telling you, 5 or 10 years, they're going to figure this thing out. They're going to fix all the buffer overflows. We're going to have cryptography done right. We're going to train the users well. And your best bet is to get out of InfoSec within 5 or 10 years. And I was like, okay, I believed it. I mean, lock and stock, that's it. That's the way it's going to be. And when Chris made his argument about the software quality stuff, it reminded me of what Rich said. And I just don't see it going away. I think clever pen testers will continue to be. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm going to agree with Chris because I disagreed with him. Now I'm going to agree with him.
Thank you.
And the reason why I'm going to agree with him, it is, but I'm debating with myself in some ways. But the reason why I agree with him is I do believe that this industry is coming down to a crash because this industry is allowing itself to be something that is automated. You know, the automation that you're talking about, and it's quickly becoming something that, you know, company can say, I could hire Trusted Sec, or I could go hire a pen test puppy mill or buy a tool, and they do a pen test. You do a pen test. You guys do a pen test. But this tool magically does a pen test, and we're allowing that to happen. And I believe that we're going to have a crash, but I still believe that there are going to be good firms that have been doing it right that'll continue to do so. But I do somewhat agree with Chris. There is a crash that is going to occur. Like you said, going from 150 to 30, that I think that may be a bit drastic, but we got to be prepared for it.
I'm not talking about tomorrow. I mean, I'm talking about 40 years out. I'm not saying.
Will we finally have hoverboards by then? No. Will we have hoverboards, secure hoverboards by then?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you'll buy one and Facebook it. I mean, trust me, I understand how my life works. You know, but at the same time, yeah, there's going to be good testers. But can I take that same good tester and go, hey, what did you learn in this test? And then have somebody who's a really good test building engineer and put that into the machine? Hell yeah. So at what point are you going to be John Henry versus the machine? Right? And I feel that realistically, we have to at some point accept that the landscape expands so fast and we don't have the talent pool to cover the landscape that we need the augmentation. Okay? We need it. You can't screw everybody in the room. You have to get some Viagra. I mean, whatever, right? Like you need to cheat in order to
family
cover the
con.
room.
Speak for yourself.
But that's.
You're the only one that can do it. I can't.
Security take Chris's mic. Security take Chris's mic.
I'm getting old. But I think that we need to embrace some of this automation. We need to embrace the way that HD has helped pioneer the integration of some of these things in a framework that allows rapid iteration of testing. If we're going to have, agile programming, we need to have agile and rapid testing. And we can't do that. We don't have the skills, we don't have the talent pool to cover that rapid iteration of testing without using the augmentation that we have and making that augmentation better.
I would agree. Isn't it awesome that we have HD Moore riding side shotgun on almost every one of our pen tests?
This is fantastic, yeah. But that's what I'm talking about.
I have a picture of him while I'm hacking every time, so it's perfect.
Can I get HD Moore's my homeboy, like the little Jesus just kind of pointing at me, but it's just you with the thumbs up.
So unrelated to that comment, my view on kind of the future security and kind of where we're at, I think Chris is right in a lot of ways. but we're still in the middle of the high growth phase of technology adoption. So we can't secure things as fast as we're going to build them, and that's why we're all valuable in this room, and why we'll still be valuable. I mean, yes, we need automation. Yeah, we need to make sure that when you go on site, if you can't remember the last 35,000 CVEs, you can still do your job. That's where automation comes into play. It helps you do your job better. It doesn't replace you, because there's so much other shit out there that you need to actually audit that you can't spend time on if you're still taking around with MS Windows 6.7. So that's kind of the viewpoint of security testing tools and security automation from my perspective.
But isn't there a fine, sorry, I'm out here, but there was a question in the audience, but isn't there a fine, sorry, yes. How's it going? Yeah, I'm right here, sorry.
No, that's not creepy.
Hi, Midget Dave.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at companies and how they're structured, let's just take any company, any industry vertical whatsoever, they still have to have people that build airplanes, that understand aerodynamics, that understand mechanics, that understand technology and make the technology better. You can't automate everything. So there has to be a balance between that. I mean, to what HG said, the automation piece of looking for all the vulnerabilities is great. That's fine. We should have that, but that should be in the vulnerability management piece. It's not how an attacker is going to go after your company. So we have to differentiate those different groups and focus on those skill sets in this industry to keep it going. I agree to Chris's point. We have to balance the automation piece with the manual piece because there isn't enough of us. There's no, I mean, we went through this gap, like where InfoSec was like, hey, there's a couple of people in the industry, there's a few people at Lexus Park hanging out, to a full-fledged industry. And so there was all these people that were experts in this industry that we, basically figured out, what to do. And then there was this huge gap of influx of security where we didn't have anybody that was beginning or anybody that was intermediary or anybody that was in between. So now we have this brand new industry with the folks that don't have the skill sets yet, but they will. But we still have to use that automation piece to augment at that point in time. So I agree with kind of both of those.
So in terms of automation and the fact that there's a dearth of new talent coming in to the field. Yeah, I said dearth in the morning. You're welcome. But I think that sharpening the tool, not just talking about like fuzzers, but the fuzzer will only find the crash. The artist is the one who finds whether or not that crash is exploitable. If we can sharpen the tools that enable that artistry, that step,
that's great.
That's something that can close a skills gap that we desperately need on the defense side. So tools are great, but it's where exactly in the vulnerability and exploitability discovery can the tools be most effective.
And then you get back to this idea of evolving from pen testing to threat emulation so that you can provide additional business value to them. You can automate a lot, and you should automate wherever you can, but posing as with a mindset of an adversary for the organization, that I don't think you'll be able to automate, at least in the near-term future until we get AI. So bring that down to the next level.
I got one thing real quick. We got a member from the audience that wants to say something here. So.
Yeah, I raised my hand before you mentioned fuzzers, so I think it's kind of cool you brought that up. But Chris just shared a really great article about Taviso finding a bunch of vulnerabilities in Kaspersky using a fuzzer. So you see, some of the best people in Google Project Zero and things like that, they're increasingly automating. And so, if people like that have to do it, wouldn't you expect a lot of people to kind of follow that example?
So one of the illustrious members of Project Zero is a man by the name of James Forshaw, and he used to work for a small consultancy out of the UK. And I know James pretty well because I wrote him a check for $100,000 this one time at Blue Hat. And for what? For what, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. It's not going to get weird. Okay, it's already weird. No, I wrote him a check for $100,000 because he found a new mitigation bypass for the latest at the time version of Windows, fully patched, etc. So he came up with a new attack technique, essentially. And that was rare enough, and that program is still ongoing and paying out $100,000 for new exploitation techniques on the latest version of Windows. But the point that you were saying about they use fuzzers, they're using automation, James does not. James does not. And a lot of the best artists in this industry, and yes, you are freaking rock stars, yes, do not use fuzzers. They are Neo, and they see the lady in the red dress. And that is how they do it. Literally, when I fed him enough beers to get him to agree to enter this particular bounty program that I started at Microsoft, I said to him, I was like, no, look, I know you can do this. And he's like, but I've never looked at IE. Oh, it's a terrible accent. Anyway, he's like, I've never really looked outside of .NET. I've only been looking at .NET Framework. And I was like, I believe in you. Have a beer, you know. And so he got permission from his employer. Took him 3 weeks. 3 weeks of staring at that lady until that red dress appeared. And he wrote up the exploit that fully bypassed ASLR and DEP, all the other mitigations on the platform. He wrote a beautiful white paper, and I wrote him a check for $100,000, no fuzzers involved.
Well, I have a question. Once you wrote him a check for $100,000, did his innovative attack thing become something that you needed him for again? Well, I mean, didn't you automate him after that?
No. So the issue.
You needed his brain every single time that vulnerability came up?
No,
or
so it
you
wasn't.
put it into the framework to make sure that, like, oh, we don't do shit like that anymore, and automate him out?
No. So the problem is, essentially a mitigation bypass requires like architectural changes to the operating system that will take time to implement, roll out, and not break everything, that has ever run before or will again in the future. So there are still unmitigated
It's
portions.
like build from source versus make clean, right? Make clean means it has bugs.
Yeah, okay. So that's not what we're talking about here, but what I'm saying is, the fact is, not only did he identify these new attack techniques, not only are there still unmitigated parts of it, but variations could be discovered, maybe have been discovered by people in this room already. And it would be great if, yes, he kept looking for that woman in the red dress. And yes, he is a unique talent, as many of those people are. And that's why I call Pwn to Own Exploit Art Walk, because these are the artists.
But look how incredibly complex it's gotten over the years, Chris. I mean, you look at traditional buffer overflows versus what we have to do today in order to get remote code execution. I mean, it's insane. But that takes a person manually to do that, to research that and go after it. So
But
you can't automate everything.
once one person figures it out,
Right.
don't they become automated after that?
Sort of. Well, look at like AFL, right? Like Zalewski's my hero, and AFL, like I need AFL tatted on my chest at this point because he's killed more bugs than any human on this planet.
I got
by
an
using
HD
the
Moore
fuzzy
tattoo
tools.
on my back, so it's fine either way.
What's a little lower, actually?
Tramp stamp.
It's the small of the back it is.
It's right there.
Sorry. But if you look at like the class of the bugs that AFL kills, like it actually, arguably, you're better off building fuzzing tools and doing vulnerability research a lot of times. But at the same time, you have to have some manually go find those initial areas to start building the fuzzer around. So there's both pieces to it.
Yeah.
Well, and also kind of getting back to the point about they found the bug, they automated it, we don't need him anymore, or we do need him anymore. I think that's kind of a moot point, because all structural engineering is an understanding of failure points. Every single truss has a failure point, every single 2x4 has a failure point, the doors have failure points, and they record those failure points. And just because we can automate that, we still have structural engineers that understand those failure points, and they research those failure points, and they still create great architectures. So moving forward, I believe that pen testing is going to be like the structural engineers for architecture of IT systems. We know the failure points, we understand where those failure points are, and we can develop mitigation. So if one truss, one computer collapses or fails, it doesn't lead to a total catastrophic failure of the architecture.
Right, so I wanted to, like 10 minutes ago, make this comment when Chris was going on about automating people. I don't think it's necessarily a problem, because if you can, as you say, there's a limited talent pool. If you can use automation to free up from the piddle and crap, for compliance reasons, that you need the checkbox. Oh, we had you're saying you could hire trusted sec or, somebody from Puppy Miller, a tool. Well, I think part of the problem is that, you're saying, well, are those all equivalent pen tests? No, they aren't. Right. There are places that, we need a pen test, for this checkbox. They're going to go with the Puppy Miller, the cheap-ass tool. But, there's reasons that they would do that, but they also need to understand, no, they're not getting the same thing. If you want to push the envelope and stuff like that, you need, the human factor and everything involved. So I would love to see if there was like an entry-level position of, security monkey that just runs the tool, but where a business also understands you still need to have, augment that with, your rock star, it's the difference between having a house painter and an artist kind of thing. Both work with the same thing, but one is so much more than the other.
This is something I think that is a gap in how we're discussing it up here, is that when we say, I had a pen test, done, that is such a huge variety of things. As somebody who has looked at way too many pen test results from lots of different companies, I will tell you that the results you get from Black Hills or whoever is way different than the result you get from that company over there. Not going to name any names, trusted sec. But but the problem is we treat those the same. And I think, and I know this is going to be a horrible thing to say, PCI did something right just recently. Right? They said you have to follow some execution standard, one we may know about, right? If you're not following this standard, this is something I've talked about for years. I've thrown out the idea of regulation, certification, some type of way to say, I know what I'm doing and I'm at this level, whatever that level happens to be. And then the people who just want the checkbox, the idiots, right? They can go get the checkbox, but everybody will know it's just a checkbox. And this is, John Strand said this years ago. I agreed with it 100% then. I agree with it 200% now. Every single one of our report standards should be public. If any pen tester says to you, I can't show you one of my reports, you need to punch him in the throat and kick him out of your building. Right? Throat punches. Absolutely. Or her, whatever, right? Like, whatever it is. We need to set people like that on fire. Right?
Well,
at the Hyatt.
So I don't think that we've got. I don't think that we have. I don't think they're idiots
Where's
for.
that coming from? Oh, it's Jay.
Hi. I don't think they're idiots for choosing. I don't think people are idiots for choosing that low end pen test. I think I think it's an uneducated market, and we will educate them. We will talk about the differences between pen tests. But let me say, if we ever get to that horror story, and for me it's a horror story at least that Chris is describing. Where everyone says, okay, this is a John Henry thing. John Henry was a nice linear race. Who can get to the end? It's that simple a mission. If it ever looks like that simple a mission, who can get to the end of a pen test first, the computer or the human, and they got different billable rates and so on. I think, and our whole industry just collapses. We have no pen testers left, or we've got a tiny number of pen testers who make less than the receptionists. I think if we get to that point, the black hats are going to do the education for us, because you'll have all of these companies that got pen tests, that all checked their box, that all had the automated pen test, got the very best tool, can point to that tool. Heck, as long as you're using the tool, you probably got the logo on your website, and the black hats will just run over them, and we'll have wonderfully great results. I mean, wonderfully horrible results.
So, all right.
But that's where we go. It's education. Someone will do it for us if we can't do it.
So you're talking about undereducated market. Could you perhaps be talking about people who are like, there's an S at the end of the HTTP. We're fine. Yeah, there's a lock. There's an S. We're good. Yeah, it said secure. It was green. All of these things, right? That we've essentially dumbed it down, trained them up to think that that's it, right? And I mean, as an old pen tester, I can tell you, with my advanced age, back at the beginning of application penetration testing, it was a matter of that same education point, and attacks and breaches are getting more numerous. I don't think they're picking up on the lesson, is what I'm saying. I mean, this has been, literally, I was pen testing 15 years ago. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm that old. So anyway, this was the lesson that we were trying to shout from the rooftops. 1, you'll never be 100% secure. A determined adversary will be able to penetrate your network no matter what. 2, that little lock doesn't mean anything. The little S at the end, yeah, that's lovely, but that has nothing to do with application layer vulnerabilities. Try harder. 3, all of the tools and all of the pen tests that you do and all of the QA that we do, you're never going to find all of the bugs.
And so with all of this, I'm wondering why we're even worried about tools and automation taking our jobs. And even if the tools and automation could potentially commoditize our work, and down level our pay grades and whatnot, a tool can't actually do true risk assessment, can't empathize with the business of what I was saying earlier, figure out what it is that the business cares about. The tool is not going to be able to tell them, that the sky falling here is going to cost you this.
Katie's trying awfully hard to convince us that she's old enough to drink. I just don't believe it.
So one quick note on this. I mean, if you look at pen testers in general and most tests, we're inherently lazy.
Trend.
We're going to basically take the lowest hanging fruit, use that to get in. So the idea behind automation is to take away those low hanging fruits. So when you actually have a real pen test done, somebody's trying to emulate an attacker, they don't just walk in and use the same thing that anyone would do in 5 seconds. So that's the goal of automation, is not for internal organizations who have automated pen tests. The idea is to fix the things that someone else would just basically breeze through in their next pen test, make them work for it a little bit more.
So, you asked a question about what the future entails, kind of going on that.
Hold on, ice medic.
It's not iced, it's warm.
Yeah, I need a medic. Where is that
Contributing
device?
to the delinquency of a minor.
Where's the device to make it cold? Ice medic.
It is actually worse, cold. At room temperature, it goes down your throat much smoother.
I rescind my call for an ice medic.
So, we're talking about PCI 3.0, and HD scooted away from Kevin, and he was like, but no, I agree with PCI 3.0 basically defining and going very clearly and saying, this is not a freaking pen test. This is what you have to do. I think that helps. But what's going to drive the industry in the next 5 years, far more than PCI or anything else, is insurance companies who are going to refuse to pay out premiums whenever companies get hacked if they got a crap pen test.
It's already started. And on the PCI front, I mean, what I also liked about it, not to get into compliance, but they also define you're not testing anymore from the cardholder data environment. You're testing from anything that could impact the cardholder data environment, which is the best thing that you could have ever met. And how many of us in the pen testing field now go into companies that want their PCI 3 assessment, like, hey, so here's our defined list of what you can attack. We're like, that's not what it says anymore. We can do anything we want to get access to that environment. That's part of the scope.
Last year, we only spent $5,000 for our pen test, and it was just these 2 servers.
Yeah. Anything that supports your infrastructure that can impact the CD environment is now in scope, which is a great thing for PCI. I mean, everybody hates it on the company side now. Everybody's complaining about it. And, it's great to see that they actually made some changes to definitions to the pen test field. I mean, it's showing the maturity that we're getting to, I think, not on the automation side, because we're not going to go to Skynet yet, not to 40 years. Chris said 40 years, okay? So in 40 years,
I'm not saying people aren't important.
Chris doesn't like people anymore. So.
DerbyCon 45.
It's DerbyCon 45. There's gonna be robots here.
I'll fly back from Hawaii.
You're gonna the Tiger Team 2 TV show is gonna be on there then? All robots? 3. Yeah.
Tiger Team 3.
Triple Tiger.
In 2
Triple
seconds.
Tiger.
Triple Tiger.
Dave will be on it.
Tiger Team 9.
Yeah, this is great stuff. Something that Ed touched on earlier, and I think this is where pen testers will always have a job. If I might quote, or be the first one to quote Mr. Robot, one of the things that he says during that series, it's just outstanding, is he says, I hack people. And that's how bad guys get in organizations nowadays, a lot of it. We know that. We know it's about social engineering. We know it's about getting people to do something that they would not normally do. And that takes research that only humans can do. It's not something that I think you can automate. And so that part of it, at least, seems to be something that will always be a part of the pen tester's work in terms of getting inside of organizations. Any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, did anybody see that set was on Mr. Robot? Heck yeah. Huh? Hack and set. That was an old version, and that thing that they actually used wasn't even in set anymore, but it's still cool. But no. What do you guys think on the human piece?
Aren't you the automation piece of social engineering? Like, you personally?
Why do you gotta call that out, dude? I mean, we're friends. No.
So as our industry matures and security companies merge and IPO, how do we make sure we do our own quality control and make sure that we're doing good assessments in pen testing. Essentially, if you come across a scope that you know shouldn't be done in a week, but they just sold it as a week, and you're doing, say, a PCI 3, and you may be able to get in a week, but say it may take you 2 weeks. How do we quality control that? How do we prevent the puppy mills from driving the industry and really having quality testing?
Just quick feedback on that was I've got a customer who got in trouble recently because they would not certify PCI because of the same issue. They basically weren't getting paid for the time. They said, you got 1 week, really small scope, and we want you to certify. Went all the way up to the board of directors of the company that they're at, and they held their ground. And it took like 6 months to resolve, but they held their ground all the way through, and eventually the company bought into it, made the remediation they needed to do, and got there. But it wasn't fun for anybody. That's really, really hard. And if you're a small company with a lot of resources and you're working for much bigger companies, good luck. It's really tough.
I do think it's completely valid to write in your report the limitations that were placed on you, including time-based limitations, while you're doing the test. I mean, because your job is to properly, as best you can in the resources you're given, to represent the risk of that organization. And part of that risk is you weren't able to look deep enough. And you should tell them that.
The other thing to keep in mind, for you shouldn't care if it qualifies for PCI 3, right? It's not your responsibility to ensure that they do the right thing at that point. That's assuming you fought that battle all the way up to the point where you signed the contract. And in my opinion, you probably shouldn't have signed that contract.
I'm on your team for this because I've been on the other side for a really fucking long time. And I've had to have the same conversation. It sucks. And the releasing your own accountability, if you have any bit of pride in what you do for a living, is wicked hard, and you just end up not doing it. Right? You end up going through the test and giving them 100 hours when you have 40 on the books because you actually have pride in your work. And it's a hard thing to get through.
No. I think
I'm going to give you a piece of advice on that.
I'm with you.
If you push back, I have found with the vast majority of our customers, and I think that we're extremely lucky because of being associated with Security Weekly and all the things that we do, that our customers know kind of what they're getting into before we actually do a test. If you push back and it goes to the customer, I have found 9 times out of 10, the customer will come back and say, I want this done right. And they will give you the additional time to do it.
Right. And that's
So
why
you just have to push back, and if they continue to push you, and as Ed said, document it and move on.
Or, see, what I was saying was, you absolutely should push back. You absolutely should say, that's not enough. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's weird I'm doing this.
Yeah, I know. Please don't do that, tug toner. But, so what I'm saying is, you should push back. You should say that's not enough. And if they don't come back and say, okay, we'll give you more time, walk away. You're right. If you do get into the contract, document it.
But you can't. Go ahead.
I can't hear you without a mic. You're going to have to shout it out. You're shaking your head. Go work for another company.
Yeah, exactly. I will tell you
Come
that.
work from us. We walk away from jobs all the time. In the middle of the job, I will stand up and be like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're not cool. I'm out.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Hey. You don't want my help? Fuck off. Go to fucking Accubant or whatever they are now. They'll take your money.
And now it's on the table, isn't it? No, but that does get to a point, and I know that a lot of you guys are working for pen test puppy mills, and it sucks. And all joking aside, the people that want to do quality work, companies that are up here, we would take every single one of you if we could. Just stick to your guns, do the best you possibly can, and look for an exit. Just know that we know that it's a problem, and constantly be looking for another company. That's the only thing I can recommend.
They will hire you. He's growing.
Well, and one note from possibly the oldest person on this panel, myself, is that this has happened before. I was in the first batch of QSAs ever. Sorry. Anyway, for any of you, by the way, who are my victims, I've gotten phone calls because I would leave my real phone number in the databases that I would pop, and I'd leave my username as I didn't know it, Dave, but it was an homage to you, Herschel Krostowski. If you find Herschel Christofsky in any of your pen test engagements. That might have been me with a 415 area code
That's
phone
a
number.
horrible way to get a date.
You know you're right.
But you were young.
Thank God. No, but the point is, this has happened before. The commoditization and the desire to get commodity type pen tests that are underscoped, underpaid, all of that stuff, and the market will eventually keep correcting itself. And this is what they're all telling you. And I can tell you from that ancient time period of 10 or more years ago, that this is absolutely something that will continue. So do find other opportunities at places where you feel like your skills are being applied the way that you want them to grow and show.
So my question is, I don't know if it's really a question, but so we've noticed lately that breaches and stuff, that the attackers are staying in the networks longer. They're sitting there and they're watching and they're waiting and they're slowly exfiltrating stuff and creating persistence. Do you think that automation tools will soon be able to do that, since we're talking on the human automation standpoint, that that's something that is an artist and a human sitting there watching and waiting and knowing how the blue team's reacting and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the current trend of pen test tools out there, if you look at things like the Puppy stuff released a couple days ago, you look at the stuff that Raphael's doing with Cobalt Strike 3, I don't want to talk about all the competitors, but basically if you look at both the open source and commercial space, everyone's working towards those goals of building persistent testing frameworks, both open source and commercial. So that's where the trends are going today.
Now, what do you think about security products that have massive security exposures in them that are supposed to be protecting the network, i.e. running your web server as root, or i.e. writing your application in PHP? Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what you're talking about. All security software is secure.
Yeah, I don't computer,
That's
bro.
security software. It's in the title.
I mean, aren't we supposed to have security practices that we follow as security people writing secure code? Aren't we supposed to hey, we probably shouldn't have crappy code getting introduced into customer environments when it's supposed to protect their environment. We shouldn't be running our web servers as root. We shouldn't be, I think that's like a 1985 thing, right? I mean, that's like old school Linux thing right there, right?
Isn't that what our mother told all of us, right? Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. Right? Don't we all have to follow that kind of constantly? Yeah, sure, I don't have a password on my phone, but I teach you how to secure your enterprise. Come on.
Nothing sadder than us adding Metasploit modules for Metasploit into Metasploit.
That's so is time slower on the inside? Is it?
So
is that
meta. So meta. I got an idea. How about bug bounties?
This is the last topic of the day, because I think it's really important here. We're running out of time. But, where have bug bounties gone inside of... And, by the way, are bug bounties and pen testing competing?
Some people are trying to make them compete, but in fact, you can't actually just operate with pure bug bounties alone. I say this from a company that does bug bounties. Yeah, enables bug bounties. The fact of the matter is, you will always need decent pen testers. You'll ideally get great pen testers, but you'll always need decent pen testers. And you're not necessarily going to expose the same kinds of transparency. You're not necessarily going to do white box bug bounties on unreleased code. You're not necessarily going to have people who are going to be, file format aware of your, for your parsers and all that stuff in a bug bounty situation. So it is that QA augmentation and potentially some commoditization of finding 0 days in your own, applications and whatnot, for which there aren't a lot of eyes. But absolutely, you will still need pen testing always.
I would say from a bug bounty side, the ability to detect and have folks that focus on your code to identify flaws is a massive asset to our industry. And from a pen testing perspective, they're completely different goals. What we're looking for are ways in that an adversary may go in and attack and compromise, and from there cause damage to the organization. Whereas, we're looking for defects in applications, defects in different environments in the areas to go and track and fix. I think they're completely different goals, but something that's to the same goal of making sure that security is done in a good way. So I completely agree with both of those as well. So, agree?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the panel. Let's give a round of applause for everybody here. And thank you for the audience participation in the questions. It was wonderful. These folks actually sound like they know what they're talking about. It's really weird. But no, we appreciate everybody coming out here. That's the end of DerbyCon. Everybody have a good... No, I'm just kidding. We're going to do a quick lunch break. And so we're going to be breaking these rooms down into individual rooms. So this will be track 2. Track 1 will be there. Track 3 will be there. And there's a lot of other tracks around the place. So get familiar. We're going to be opening up the vendor areas, all the lockpick villages, all that stuff's now going on. So welcome to DerbyCon. We'll see you soon.